Welcome to the Crypto Campfire. Combining the technologies of Mayberry and Star Trek, Mitch and the Professor, featuring special guest Samantha Radocchia.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crypto Campfire podcast. This is the Professor.
And Mitch.
And today we're going to be talking with Samantha Radocchia. She's the author of Bitcoin Pizza and the co-founder of Chronicled. Before we start talking to Sam, let's grab that crypto news from the Crypto Gent.
Thanks, Professor. Hello, Crypto Campfire listeners, and welcome to the cryptocurrency news in a flash with the Crypto Gent. Mark Zuckerberg outlines how Libra can impact ad revenue. CoinMarketCap launches more measures, but fears of Binance favouring remain, and fake Ripple giveaways continue to put crypto users at risk. That's the cryptocurrency news in a flash with the Crypto Gent, and it's back to you, Professor.
Thanks a lot, Crypto Gent. Samantha, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you on. You know, we usually start off down the how did you get into crypto rabbit hole, but considering the state the world is in right now, and we're all kind of experiencing sort of a similar thing, why don't we talk about what things are like where you are? Are you on lockdown right now? Are you in some sort of a quarantine? Or are you guys kind of operating normally at this time?
I am. So I was actually in Thailand and Singapore when this started, December through March 1st. So I feel like I've actually been living this life for quite a time. I ended up coming back home. So my home is in the Northeast. I've lived all over the world, but I come from the New York City area. So I got home, and then within 2 days, you know, people were saying there would be an imminent lockdown. So I left with, fortunately, I have a brother in the city, and my other brother and sister-in-law were coming home from India. They came home early from a trip that they were on, and now we're all together quarantining in a house. So I feel very grateful to be with family in this situation, but it's obviously very odd.
So did you escape from New York?
Did I did. We left in the wee hours of the evening thinking there'd be like National Guard in there. But no, this is obviously being in the crypto community. And obviously there are a lot of people in the space, myself included, that maybe talk about this stuff a lot, whether it's prepping or privacy or, you know, authoritarian governments. You know, as I was experiencing this in Thailand from a closer proximity to the epicenter in Wuhan, and seeing some of the extreme measures that, you know, the Chinese government took, which, you know, in hindsight now seem to have worked to flatten the curve or not, but yet, you know, encroaching on civil liberties. And myself, I like to geek out all day long about things like, you know, surveillance capitalism. And then watching it happen, I'm like messaging all of my friends and family back home being like, this looks kind of serious, everyone. And then I get back and, you know, I'm back home in New York. And then within days, there's talk that New York is taking similar measures. So it did feel very surreal and like a heightened escape from New York scenario. I know I met up with some people in the industry for, you know, kind of the last meetup or some drinks. We just got together, and then within a day it was like really inappropriate to be doing that. So it's super surreal this past week.
Well, fortunately you're healthy. Michigan just went on lockdown Monday night at midnight or Tuesday morning, however you want to look at it. So yesterday was kind of a really awkward day for me. It was just like, okay, so wow. I mean, you know, it was real to me before that, but at that point you're like, oh shit, you know, and you look at the numbers that are actually being reported of cases. And, you know, I think in Michigan we had like around 30 or 40 last Wednesday, and we have over 2,500 today. And that was up from 1,000 on Sunday. So it's like, wow, you know, how rapidly it changes, and the landscape changes for it is just, it's crazy.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, it's quite interesting to me as someone, I've spent the past decade of my life building companies as an entrepreneur, but the past year, after writing the book, my book, Bitcoin Pizza, and then traveling and doing a lot of speaking and education on the future, generally what that will look like. And I think a huge part of that is decentralization. So of course, with Bitcoin as the cornerstone of that idea, but I've applied the concept, not necessarily using a blockchain as a technology, but the concept of decentralization, of how that will happen in education or healthcare or gaming or all of these industries. And it's one thing to stand on a stage or sit in a boardroom and talk about this stuff to people and say this is going to happen. It's another thing to see it happen overnight because of something like a virus that I don't think anyone could have accurately predicted that would be the catalyst, and to see how quickly a lot of these mainstream paradigms have crumbled. Like even the shift to working from home. I myself experienced this in the most recent company I co-founded. I had many debates with my co-founders who were like, no, we must have an office. We can't make a distributed team. And then you realize, well, yes, we can do it. There's nothing really stopping you. And to see that happen almost overnight, for me, while it's a terrible reason for it to happen, it's also interesting to see people adapt so quickly.
It's funny, you mentioned decentralization, and we've all been talking decentralization since I can remember getting into crypto. But imagine this whole catastrophe happening and not having a centralized authority to kind of direct the theater, right?
Yeah.
Or direct the orchestra. I mean, how do we maintain the line between decentralization and centralization, but still maintain an order, right?
That's a fantastic question. I mean, and we're seeing it play out in a very high pressure scenario. Myself, I come from supply chain and manufacturing. And so most of what I've talked about, and there's, quite a few chapters in the book about decentralized manufacturing and this, autonomous network of 3D printers, et cetera, et cetera. And it's something I've been working towards. And then, seeing the shortage of personal protective equipment and ventilator parts and masks, I wanted to get involved. So I joined a bunch of these decentralized, sort of communities who are all working towards creating this equipment, and quickly found I'm well versed in this and don't know what the hell to do, joining all of a sudden like essentially a DAO with 10,000 people all doing different things. It's almost super chaotic, and of course under this sort of pressure that's to be expected. But seeing that, I started working on another project, like basically a marketplace to consolidate all of this stuff into one place and curate it, because I mean, for me, that's where I started feeling chaos. And now I started thinking, I've been talking about decentralized marketplaces, and now I'm making some sort of centralized, system for people to navigate it. And yeah, I don't know. It really is shining a lot of light on that debate.
It just shows the need for balance between the two, I think. I've always said, I've never been against government, just against government control. The government's supposed to be for the people, and they're supposed to do just kind of what they're doing right now. But, I've heard a lot of talk, well, communities can get together and support themselves. Well, yes, we can to a point. There has to be that point, that centralized authority to direct the band, so to speak. And, so yeah, it's challenging to be totally one side or the other when it comes to centralized or decentralized. So I just thought it interesting, and it came to my mind, going through all of this without a centralized government, where would we be today versus where we're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I don't know if I'd want to see that. I think we've been, primed enough. We haven't had enough experience as humans in decentralized systems to really be able to handle that quite yet. I think we're really still at the beginning of learning how to self-organize into different structures and to handle governance and things like that. which fascinates me a lot. But obviously in a situation like that, this, without any sort of, as you say, conductor, would be catastrophic. And you were even seeing it on the end of the spectrum from like an authoritarian government or governments with, one party rule. It's a lot easier to say, here's what's happening and what we're doing. I'm not advocating for that. That scares the hell out of me. But at the same time, you can see, okay, there's a correlation between the countries where they've, had more effective containment versus, watching it play out in America and being here and believing in kind of the free market and seeing that delicate balance between the government intervening or directing or providing guidance or loosening regulations if necessary, and then individuals or companies stepping up to form groups to solve problems, which I think is, kind of a cornerstone of American ideals, is very different from other countries that have experienced this so far.
Let's take this back a step real quick, and let's dive into how you got into crypto in the first place. What actually led to you discovering the crypto world?
Well, as an undergraduate in college, I started in neuroscience, studying neuroscience and theater, and was a self-taught engineer. So I have two brothers. We were all into gaming, like from a very young age. And so when I got to school, it was still something I did. I was very interested in studying human behavior. So I ended up in anthropology. And for my thesis, I was like, I really don't want to study, I don't know, the whole discipline was messed up to me. And you're studying some in quotes, primitive people on an island. And it just didn't really seem to capture the world that I was living in at the time, which was, where social media was new. We were in the midst of 2008 financial crisis. And so I found myself spending a lot of time in the virtual world Second Life, mainly for research purposes, and then proposed to the department if I could study it for my thesis, which I continued into graduate school. So I lived in world. I had an avatar and character. I set up a digital t-shirt shop. I started making Linden dollars. I quickly found that there were exchanges, very rudimentary exchanges into Bitcoin or dollars, and was just fascinated with the concept of virtual worlds, but more importantly, virtual economies, which is one part of obviously a society from the perspective of an anthropologist. So I studied it in the way that you would any other culture, and by extension, became aware of Bitcoin. So that was in 2009, 2010. I didn't do anything about it. I wish I had in hindsight, but mainly continued to research from an academic perspective, started some companies that were unrelated, and then came back full circle in 2014 when I was living in Utah. I met some people on the board of Overstock.com that were wanting to build a crypto loyalty product super early, way too early, but helped them out with that, and then ended up meeting my co-founders for Chronicled, where we came together in a unique situation, really just all people from the community, but wanting to explore other use cases for the underlying technology. So this was still at the time where the only blockchain was the Bitcoin blockchain, and we wanted to see if we could use it for other things. So at the time, it was the decentralized DMV or title registrations and things like that. And so we ended up moving the company over many years through pretty much every industry. Now it's doing supply chain, revenue management in the pharmaceutical industry, but it was quite a journey. I've seen a lot of the different sides of this industry, and I went from literally pitching people on a technology that they didn't understand. Forget blockchain, that term. They didn't even know Bitcoin. So going from that to being part of the problem maybe that there was blockchain, not Bitcoin, and then going back to, more of the crypto and Bitcoin side of things, and seeing everything in between has been, again, such a great journey. And I'm excited to continue. I mean, yeah, I hate the word. I definitely would never use the word influencer. I'm a builder, an educator, maybe an advocate. I like to call it how it is. So that's why the subtitle of the book is The No Bullshit Guide. Really just wanting to help people understand all of the nuances of this nuanced industry.
Sam, what are your thoughts on the digital US dollar that has been discussed recently by the Fed?
I've seen it. I haven't read the proposal.
Okay.
I mean, it's deeply, I think honestly at this point, every country is moving in that direction they were going to. What concerns me is that if China or other countries have a leg up in terms of recovering from the COVID virus sooner or like before we do, and they use that position to advocate, their digital currency around the world via their supply chain network. I mean, that's something that would be a very compelling argument to move the world onto a digital currency that's backed by China.
Right.
Again, not supporting that. I'm saying like we're late to the game if we're only proposing that now
sure.
in the United States. But no, I don't support either one of those things. I think it's ridiculous, and I'm very again, if there is a time to really start to understand why something like Bitcoin is important, it's now. So I think, I don't even really know where to start, because there are a lot of things that in theory, people in our industry believe or talk about, and maybe we got sick of hearing our own voices. You keep saying it over and over again for 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, however long you're thinking about this theoretically or practically, and then you start to experience moments where you realize, oh shit, this stuff is really happening to a point that might be catastrophic or we can't turn back from. And that makes me feel very excited. But yes, on the digital dollar side, I just think all of this is kind of a ridiculous ploy and coming too late.
Definitely coming too late. I just think that if the United States, it's almost inevitable that every country's currency will eventually be a digital type currency, similar to what we have been used to for the last 10 years as far as cryptocurrencies. But, I guess if we still had the choice to utilize whichever one we chose, would make it different, would make it interesting, because I'd be curious to see, like, say the United States had a digital dollar and we were still trading Bitcoin and trading Litecoin, stuff like that. I'd be curious to see where and how it stacked up to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, what is it backed by? I mean, is it backed by anything other than one-to-one dollar?
I'm assuming that it's just going to be a one-to-one type thing. That forever, but it almost sounded like we would be going to credits, and it's kind of like those sci-fi movies you see. That's 10,000 credits, whatever. Like we're
Is that your alien voice?
Cards, yeah, right. And everything's gonna be done on credits, and that's 5 credits for that food, sir. You know what I mean? It's really weird, but think about all the sci-fi shit we've seen in the last 25 years and how much of it has actually happened. You're like, wow, this is weird. Because back when you were a kid and you're watching things and they flipped open this little device and it was a phone, back then, and it didn't exist yet, but yet it was in the movies. Weird.
Yeah. I mean, again, the credit systems, I am wary of that. And I mean, I guess you could look at any sort of financial transaction as a debit and credit. I mean, that's what a dollar is. But if we get into that dystopian sci-fi sort of space where then those credits are tied to other things, whether that's your access to certain tiers of healthcare or welfare or housing, and we move into a social credit system that's, similar to the one proposed by China, that's where, again, I get nervous. That's not a world in which every single transaction or financial transaction is tracked, and you know, you don't have the privilege, which I believe is a right, of privacy, is dangerous to me. Even if we now say, as you know, and by we I mean the United States, you know, uphold certain values or constitutional rights, that doesn't mean that'll always be the case. Maybe I come off as a little paranoid to say that, but I do think, you know, when I see situations where, you know, they're not, you know, local businesses that are not accepting cash and moving to credit only, is kind of forcing people, one, in a position who don't have access to banking or credit system, but also two, people who want to preserve privacy and not have every interaction tracked and then measured, and you know, having all of that valuable data shared. You know, it's a concerning future.
It's funny. I look at civil liberties as like a box of cookies. And every time somebody takes a cookie, you don't think that much of it because you still got that whole box. But after a while, that box starts getting more and more empty, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting next to a box of cookies, actually. So have you heard of Tate's cookies? They're from like the Northeast.
No.
Those are
They're
those
very
gluten-free ones, right? The real thin.
I don't know, but well, they have non-gluten-free ones too, and they're
okay.
thin and crackers. You just eat the whole thing. Or Girl Scout cookies. I don't know. Yes, that's a great analogy. I think you one after another, and then it's empty.
I could go for some Girl Scout cookies right now.
Oh my God. Why do we have to get on cookies? Damn it. I did it. It's all my
I got
fault.
some Oreos in the cupboard.
Oreos. That's like Milk's favorite
We
cookie.
bought a big family pack size of Oreos just in case we were quarantined. We were like, we got to have something good. If we're going to hoard anything, let's grab a couple things of junk food instead of the extra 5 packs.
Right. Comfort food.
Some Oreos, got some Doritos.
Yeah.
We should be all right. You know, it sounds like just like you're going down with the ship. The end of the world, got the Doritos.
I just want to enjoy it.
Exactly. So Sam, you're a software developer, yes?
In a past life, yes.
I only ask because I'm also a coder and I've been into it since like 6th grade. And I was just kind of curious how your experience was being introduced to it. Like, how did you actually get into that?
So I self-taught, again, from the gaming world. I don't know. I have 2 brothers. They're very much into computers. We went to like website building camp when we were like 6 years old for summer camp, like really nerdy shit. Not very good at sports, I guess. And just, you know, came from that perspective. I mean, I wouldn't call myself like deep coder. I was building like websites about puppies when I was 12, but came from this world that was very, again, supported by my family. My dad has an engineering, operations, logistics mindset, had access to technology young. So, you know, I started working from that perspective, but again, I was always way more interested on the product side of like understanding and seeing problems on both the individual and collective or social levels, and then seeing what kind of systems we could build to make things either more efficient or usable for people. So I did for a long time, like start building stuff myself, and then building teams and running engineering teams. And then I moved more into, I mean, I've been more of a generalist, so CEO or product stuff. But like, again, I don't know. I guess if I need to build something, like right now I'm just working on a marketplace and it feels good to get my hands dirty as well. If I see a problem that needs solving and I jump in, then I usually just do it myself.
That's a really nice thing to have that ability, isn't it? Like even just for the simplest things. And it's like having that one little tool in your toolbox that most other people don't have, or at least now that's different. You know, like you said, you started web coding camp at like what, age 6, you said? Like
it was like literally like building geosite things. It was not like real anything, but it, again, getting that level of literacy, which for that time, you know, even having a computer was a big deal for people. Yeah, now kids are growing up with like computers in their hands from a very young age. And I think that's a basic level of literacy that they should have.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where you're going to have to know how to interact with computers, at least on some level, a little bit deeper than the average world does, so you can actually get by, because everything is so computerized. And especially as we move to the virtualized economies and start dealing with more and more of that, it's going to be so critical that you have at least that base level knowledge. You may not necessarily need to know how to code, but at least having a good understanding of the hardware you're working with and how it operates is going to be very key.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, like that's where I have a very much like maker, experimental sort of get my hands dirty mentality. So things I learned on the hardware side, I'd like take apart computers, put them back together. Again, from the gaming world, like building your own gaming rigs, things like that, taught me a lot. And I did the same in terms of like experimenting with mining or getting into 3D printing. And now you're seeing a lot of these, this community of hobbyists come out. Even today, a bunch of friends messaging me saying, I have a 3D printer, how do I print masks or help out and that's great. And then you see on the flip side, all of the people who are completely not tech savvy to the level of like, what is Zoom? How do I use this thing called Zoom because I'm a mental health therapist and I need to see my clients and I have to use this, Zoom. And,
hey, don't judge me.
Well, yeah, we're all still
I'm one of
figuring
those
it out.
people.
Okay, well, so I'm saying there's quite the spectrum of everyone figuring out parts of the new economy. And I think a general tech savviness, tech awareness is important. And people, I mean, I taught my mom to use like FaceTime or Zoom maybe just a few months ago. When I was traveling, I'd call back and was like, look, we can see each other on video when I call you. And it was baffling to her. And
wow.
I'm glad that she's now equipped with that knowledge, because now she just celebrated her 60th birthday party and we did it over, a video call, which was odd and kind of sad, but I'm glad that she was able to do it. So, I think there, again, is the range.
That is cool how technology has changed so much that we can actually see each other face to face, miles and miles or continents apart. Pretty incredible how that works. So I got to ask you this, right? I'm up 4,000, 5,000 feet in the air. What would possibly possess me to want to jump out of a perfectly safe airplane? Can you explain this to me?
4,000.
Like that rush of skydiving.
Well, it's 13,500 is ideally where you'd want to be jumping from.
Okay,
but,
see, I'm always on the ground, so I wouldn't have known that.
I don't know. Again, curiosity, like all the things that have driven me in, all of the areas where I learn something, I feel like I get like super obsessed with a topic. I go really deep, really fast. So skydiving happened pretty young for me. I wanted to do it really badly. My family obviously did not support this. So on the day that I turned 18, I showed up at the drop zone that was near to my house that I found, and went on a tandem jump by myself, which was super odd. They were like, you don't have any friends here for your birthday party? I'm like, no, I just want to jump. Let's do it. So we do it. And I'm immediately like, okay, can we do flips? Can I do what these people are doing? And I saw like a team, the state team and the Golden Knights, which is the Army's team, were going up and practicing, training. And so I really like immediately saw people doing it, the 4-way relative work, which I ended up competing in. And so I just like asked, how do I get licensed? They said, show up tomorrow. And in 15 days I had a license, and then I just didn't stop. So that was an incredible experience. I think it was more like because I was young and I had a very high tolerance for risk at the time. And then over time, like by the time I hit 22, I started to know people who were seriously injured or died doing the sport, and started to rethink it. And then one day I had kind of a really bad feeling and didn't do it again. And this was after like many times having really terrible near-death experiences.
Wow.
So, I mean, I learned a lot about things like So your response when you jump out of a plane or you fall is to put your hand, like to brace yourself. So if you've ever fallen off the bed or out of a chair or just like fallen on the floor, you want to put your hands out or grab for something. And so on my third jump, I did that. I launched from the plane and I immediately like tried to turn around and grab the airplane. And of course it was like, you know, that's the worst thing you can do because you're hitting the air and you start spinning out of control. And so my instructors flew off of me. I'm alone. Thank goodness I was at 14,000 or 13,500 because what they say is if you're in that scenario and you're just learning to pull your parachute. So I did, and I watched the bag that it's wrapped in as I'm on my back flipping over come between my legs. And I say, oh shit, like my life is flashing before my eyes. And I hit it with my left hand where my altimeter is, and it gets caught around the altimeter in my fingers, and it breaks my fingers and my hands. And I'm now entangled in my parachute.
Oh, God.
And so somehow, I don't know how, like time literally stopped moving. And I like was able to meticulously remove all of these lines from my hand, and my parachute open. It was like kind of tangled, but I kicked it out and I was fine and like landed normally. Obviously it was like jacked up on adrenaline, and my instructors were like, oh my God, we were watching, they were trying to get back to me in the air. And you know, this is meanwhile you're free falling towards the earth. You have maybe 30 seconds. And so that was my third jump ever. And then I continued.
This is like, I got goosebumps just listening to it. I can't imagine what they felt like watching it. Holy shit.
Crazy.
The thing that what taught me is like your natural response. So I love this analogy because it really was like, obviously it was life or death, but it taught me this really important metaphor where, so you have these conditioned responses for your whole life. If you fall on the ground, you put your hands out. If you don't, you're going to hit your face on like the floor. And so that's one context, that's gravity that's on land. When you move into a new context, which is like the air, and you're still feeling gravity, but it's totally different because if you put your hand out in that same way, which is your conditioned response, you're going to flip out of control. So the thing that I learned that day was that what my instructors were telling me on the ground, but you could never experience until you're in it, is that like you have to relax and just fall. And by relaxing, your center of gravity, which is like your stomach area, will pull you down and you stay stable. And I use that a lot when I talk about, I don't know, like crypto for people. It's like we're all conditioned in this one context. Like it's as if we're like walking around on the ground, and if we fall, we put our hands down. So maybe if we fall, we, you know, have a stimulus package. And now all of a sudden we're like not in that context. We're maybe falling from the sky at 14,000 feet. And so what worked before doesn't work in this context, or it might even be detrimental. So that's like a moment for me. And again, I don't do that anymore. I've like recently learned to scuba dive, and that's a whole different story.
Oh, that's
like
better. One aspect to the other. I think instead of being 14,000 feet above the ground, I'm going to be 100 feet below.
No, I'm not a slow moving person. So that was super challenging. It was like straight up panic attacks the entire time, but I did it. But anyways, it's like the idea of context shifting, whether it's, you know, super simple, you go from like a city to, you know, out in the forest, you know, people can definitely relate to that concept. And I think it's hard to relate to a concept that might be like our existing system of our financial system no longer works, or our government systems that we have, like there might be something else. And that's like a very abstract and scary concept to discuss. But, you know, I think most people have experienced at a shift in context where, you know, you do one thing in one place and you try it again, it doesn't work in that context. So, you know, that's what part of what got me also very interested in helping to advocate for and envision a new economy, new systems to support that, whether they are technical systems, social systems. It's a completely new paradigm. I mean, again, being so deep into it, as with you both, and I'm sure others that are listening, it's still hard. Like, I find myself, participating in some decentralized communities and then wondering, like, do I have security? And what do I do here? And this notion, even if you're thinking about an organizational structure, that's a big thing that's changing right now, of like, what is the role of a company and will we have companies? That's one example I find myself still, mulling over.
So Sam, I got one last question for you before we wrap up here. Let's go down memory lane. Our research department has informed us that you dressed up like Batman for Halloween in 1994. Can we relive that story?
Oh my God. Stalk my Instagram, I think.
I'm not sure where she found it.
1994. Yeah, I've dressed up. The better one that you might not have seen was when I dressed up as like my dad, like a business person with a beard and mustache. It was very strange.
We're going to have a talk with the research department.
Batman. I was Catwoman and my brother was Batman.
That's amazing.
But, yeah, I still wear like mostly all black things and a leather jacket and have, I guess, tattoo. I mean, I have so many tattoos that I really can only wear black because everything else, like if I wear a pattern, it clashes.
Oh wow, that's
so
cool.
Yeah, I guess.
That's awesome. So no matter how much cooler your dad costume was, the Batman costume set the stage for Halloween for you for the rest of your life.
It did. It was probably I'm like permanently wearing that costume now.
That's amazing.
The last name, at least on Twitter, couldn't be more fitting because you are totally rad. This was an amazing podcast. Oh my God, Sam, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I mean, if it wasn't the skydiving thing alone had me on the edge of my seat. So that was amazing. Damn, we definitely need to do this again.
We can spend another hour talking about how she's going to go searching for treasure scuba diving. I don't care if she says she's not. She's going to be a treasure hunter.
I will be. I don't know what that is, but I'll do it. And next time, let's do it around a camp, like a real campfire, social distanced, of course.
Absolutely.
But the fire will kill everything in between.
Hell yeah.
That counts. That counts.
Yeah.
And I was saying treasure hunter, like you're going to definitely go search for gold in sunken ships. I guarantee it. You learn to scuba dive. That's what.
I don't know if that'll have much value, but we'll see.
It's going to be useless, but I want to see it.
Right.
I'll be a treasure hunter in the asteroids, but.
Nice.
Awesome. Thanks again so much for coming on the show tonight. This was awesome. I just had so much fun. That was great. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That was really fun.
Have a good night.
Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Man.
That was fun.
Skydiving. Scuba diving.
Am I right? She's totally rad. That was crazy.
That was great.
Perfect.
I understand she also flies airplanes. But what else does she do?
Wait, how does that, the guy that drinks Dos Equis, the most fabulous, wonderful,
the most interesting man in the world?
Yeah, that's it. She's got to be one of the most interesting women in the world that we've talked to yet. That was crazy.
She definitely never slows down.
No.
Always something new, apparently.
Oh my God, it was fun.
Crazy. There's definitely hours more of life stories. So
for
definitely
sure.
looking forward to another one.
Yeah, we might want to try booking her in the next couple of weeks because we know how busy she gets.
Well, she was sick and stuck in Thailand last time, I think.
That's right. Wow, what a great show. That was a lot of fun. Guys, we hope you enjoyed it. We continue to do this. We'll continue to do our lives, and we're hoping that you guys get some enjoyment on those. Some feedback would be amazing from you to know what more you guys are looking for, because we're all about bringing you some new and interesting stuff. So let us know, get us some words of ideas out there. Professor, what do you think?
I think one thing. You know what that is?
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you.
Ah, fucker.
Okay, fine. I think what one thing that I do know is that I'm really, what was I saying? oh yeah. Don't worry about it. I got it. We're good.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's just done. I know just one thing, and that's that you should go to coinflip.tech, look at the map, and find the closest CoinFlip ATM near you, And then don't drive there because you're supposed to be social distancing, but just go on their website and buy Bitcoin from their website if you want to buy Bitcoin. Not financial advice, but have a good time. Get some Bitcoin. Check out CoinFlip. I don't know.
Buy Bitcoin, damn it. Oh my God. Guys, have yourselves
Not
a great
financial
night.
advice.
Definitely not financial advice. We will talk to you soon.
Take it easy, guys.
Peace.